Thank you very much, everybody. As you can see on the screen there, the topic today is the role of the finance and investment community in Ireland's sustainable future. And I'm glad to say that I'm joined by a very knowledgeable panel here today, spanning the venture capital arena, banking, and the not-for-profit space. So quite an important array of different views, and we'll try and cover the topics, in a way that makes sense. I'd maybe like to start before I ask each of the individual members of the panel to introduce themselves from my own perspective. With Bord na Móna, the importance of this topic is very much connected to what our CEO, Tom Donlan, was talking about earlier today. And if you think about the ambition and the vision for Bord na Móna, that obviously has to be paid for. And we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years understanding how much that's going to cost. So to deliver on the vision, how much is it going to cost, and how do we access the capital and the sources of funds to be able to do that? And the ticket is probably approaching 3 billion at this stage over the next 10 to 12 years. And it's not just about knocking on the door of a bank, it's about also talking to other types of investors, partners, partnerships, having a really open mind about the sources of funding. And hopefully through the panel today, you'll get a flavour for some of that from their own perspectives as well. So I'll maybe hand over to you now, Peter, and we'll work through the panel and ask you to introduce yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the panel, and thank you to the organization for inviting me. You'll quickly catch that I'm not from Ireland, so I flew in from Amsterdam, from the Netherlands, just yesterday. I want to compliment you with what I think is a fantastic get-together right after COVID. And just a brief reflection on what I've been experiencing here, also in comparison to the Netherlands and sort of the rest of Europe. I think the transformation of Bord na Móna is phenomenal. I don't know of any case that is similar, especially the speed of the transition. And the other thing that I found was the sort of the sense of purpose that you have across shareholders of going for sustainable. I think you've made that decision. It's behind you. You know there will be difficulties ahead, but you're going for it. And that's actually something that in the Netherlands, where we also do very many things, you can sort of still feel a little bit of that hesitation. So I'd like to make that point and that observation as a bit of an outsider. ECBF stands for European Circular Bioeconomy Fund. We are a European investment bank, actually an EU Green Deal initiated fund of 300 million. We invest all over Europe, including in Ireland, more in the later stage startups actually scale up. So we're really looking for already some commercial traction, certainly proof of concept that this will work.
Good, thank you, Brian.
Thanks for the opportunity again to speak to you. My background is originally as a startup founder. I was co-founder of 3 startups, 2 of which we were lucky enough to exit from successfully, and one of which failed and had to be put out of its misery. I've spent most of the last 20 years of my career in venture capital, firstly with an Irish firm, Trinity Venture Capital, and more recently with Draper Esprit, which is a pan-European firm, primarily based in London, that has recently been rechristened Molten Ventures. So that's my background.
Thank you.
Great. My name is YVONNE Holmes, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer with AIB, and I've been in this role almost 3 years. So basically, my role is devoted to looking at how we embed ESG across everything that we do. It's already embedded as a key pillar in our strategy, but that requires a huge transformation to really embed it across everything from across the operations.
Hi, everybody. I'm DEIRDRE Mortell. I am CEO of Rethink Ireland. And we were created by government about 6 or 7 years ago now. in order to both stimulate philanthropy and back social innovation. So what we have done is we've brought together philanthropy from companies, families, individuals, multinationals, indigenous companies, together with government funds in order to tackle Ireland's critical social and environmental issues, and we back innovative solutions to those with grants, non-financial supports and accelerators to help them scale. So we are approximately a 73 million euro fund now over the last 6 years, roughly 50-50 government and philanthropy from all different sources, from AIB, Google, Bank of America, IPP Insurance, and also a number of high net worth families. So what I would say, just as we kick off, is if you fit into any of those categories and you're interested in building our next green transition fund, come and talk to me.
Very good. Good pitch. Thank you. FAYE.
Hi, everyone. I'm FAYE Walsh DROUILLARD. Please accept, forgive me for my lateness. I literally just got off a plane from Madrid, so glad to make it here on time. So I am the founder of Wake Up Capital. We are the first early-stage impact venture fund based here in Ireland, trying to fill a gap of impact-minded capital for solutions solving some major social and environmental issues. I say I'm often the other side of the coin of Rethink Ireland. We obviously support just for-profit companies, both here and in Ireland and also in other countries in Europe. My background is I'm a recovering social entrepreneur who became extraordinarily frustrated with the lack of impact-minded capital for solutions that matter, and have been on a journey. You might be able to hear I'm originally from the US. I've spent time in France and the Netherlands, and have been in Ireland for about 8 years. I've already participated in this program as a speaker. I think it is absolutely excellent, and I brag about it when I'm abroad. And I'm delighted to be part of this panel. Thanks.
Thanks very much, FAYE, and delighted you made it on time, because the first question was going to be aimed at you, so that helps. Maybe just from a business perspective, in Boardnamona, for example, when we think about sustainability, we think, this is it's a real mega trend. It's, and it's, as well as being good and the right thing to do from a business perspective, it can be very successful, and we're starting to see the fruits of that. Is it fair to read through to the wider arena to say that, sustainability is part of a mega trend and therefore attractive for investment, which should, in theory, make it easier, but there must be obstacles as well. So what are the kind of opportunities and challenges in the space, would you say?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are a few different trends that are coming together to make it an excellent opportunity for investment. Well, one of which would be obviously the pressure on governments to create regulations around the damage we've caused with the modern economy, which has been mostly extractive and quite polluting. And for now, no one's really lost money as a result of it in a major way for people to make significant change. So I think the regulations that are coming in are demonstrating the need for this. And that's going to, of course, create business opportunities. I think another thing that's happening, which we're probably all familiar with, is the younger generation is really demanding sustainability in products in the places where they work, in their everyday lives. And that's, of course, creating more opportunities, I think, for products. And I think, the other thing that we're all facing on a regular basis, and I certainly do when I'm back in California, and we're trying to escape fires all the time, is we're dealing with mass climate change and irregular weather patterns that we as humans are partially responsible for, and we just can't avoid that. So as much as I think classic business might want to ignore it, the reality is that we really have no choice. We probably need 3 planet Earths to manage the population of people coming by 2050. And then I think also the fact of doing good and doing well has become a thing, for which I'm very grateful. For a long time I felt like I've been on the sidelines. I think many others in this space have as well, sort of pioneers in sustainability and impact. And I think we're seeing a lot more money go into big ESG funds, into impact funds. So all those pressures coming together. And then there's been some great success stories. Some are more debatable than others. We could talk about Tesla. We could have a whole panel on Tesla, but that's obviously been very successful. There's some other companies that have done incredible things in the space. Like I think Tony Chocolonely is one of my favorite Dutch companies that just maybe not as much on sustainability, but all around fairness and global supply chains. And of course, Patagonia and other big brands are really becoming kind of like the stars out there, B Corps, et cetera. People are becoming more familiar. So I think we're going to see, we're at the beginning stages, but I think we're going to see it just grow and grow and grow.
Good. Thank you, Faye. Peter, I was going to throw this one at you. It's kind of a bit of a live example at the moment. We've had the recent example with Unilever, where the management team have been pushing a strategy of sustainability at the core of their business, and they were getting pushback then from some of their investors. You know, does that imply that the investment community still has to catch up, or, you know, do we need to find a middle ground somewhere, do you think?
That's a tough one, right? And there's so much going on in that particular thing. Not in the last place that, of course, Unilever made the wrong decision to move its headquarters out of the Netherlands. So I think that's roughly when all the trouble started. Jokes aside, of course, this is a moment in time. I think Unilever management should be praised for saying we have a problem. We need to solve something. And of course, we all love to have the solution where you have, 1 and 1 is 3. We can do sustainability, and we can be more profitable for our shareholders. That will happen sometimes, hopefully a lot of the times. But I also think we need to be fair. There are going to be moments when this will not happen. If you are in big oil and you can't pump big oil anymore, you're probably going to lose your job. I think Boord has had its own share. There were people taking peat or mining peat, and they lost that job. We can try to fix it, but that will not always be possible. Now, I think Unilever, again, I think it is a moment in time. Can you compare it with Procter & Gamble? Are they doing better? Are they doing more for the planet? Are they de-risking their business as much as Unilever is trying to do? I think there's a whole lot going on. So it's very easy for investors, especially the ones that were critical about the whole ESG investment wave that we've seen, and I think they're taking their moment to say, you see, that's not going well. It needs to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. And to pick up on Faye's points, you consider this to be an attractive investment space as well, Peter?
And so, absolutely, I think this will be an example of the rising tide will lift all the boats. On top of that, there are actually not all that many boats. So yes, we see what we have in Europe. ECBF picks up deal flow. There is more deal flow than we expected, but I think we need a lot more deal flow if we want to transition the whole economy. And I wanted to add one element here to the benefit, let's say, of a transition. And that is actually the creation of jobs. So I think the circular bioeconomy will allow us to create many more jobs locally, regionally. If you want to recycle plastic, well, somebody will actually have to move the stuff with the plastic. Somebody will actually have to fill machines. So I think we will create a lot of those jobs. The right to repair will create a lot of local jobs, and that is precisely what we need at this particular time. You can see it in the political disparities. So I believe this is a fantastic investment opportunity. It will grow on itself, and it will also solve at least one other problem, and that is local employment.
Very good, thank you. And Brian, then maybe from your perspective, are you seeing the whole ESG drive changing perspectives with regard to portfolios and the makeup of portfolios for investment companies?
Yeah, I mean, if you think of what I do for a living is I sell money, and by definition, there's nothing more commoditized by money. So, how do you differentiate yourself in a scenario when you're selling something that's commoditized, that is commoditized? And the reality is it's around brand and reputation. And as a result, in the VC world in particular, we respond to kind of pressures associated with brand and reputation, and with regulatory pressures, with kind of government saying that you need to do you need to do this. So I think kind of the big things increasingly for VCs are, number one, they don't want to invest in anything that would be broadly perceived as being extractive or negative. They want to invest in things that will be brand enhancing. And secondly, regulation, for example, the sustainable finance regulations coming out of the EU, while they haven't had a big impact on venture capital yet, what you're already seeing is VC firms placing sustainability clauses in their term sheets. You know, today they tend to be reasonably soft, and they'll say things like, you know, you covenant to have a sustainability plan in place within a year if you don't have one already. Now, that's a fairly mild thing. In the future, it'll be, we warrant that we have a sustainability plan in place and functioning, you know. So, yeah, definitely a lot of change. I think broadly speaking, for venture capital, what we're always looking for is high-value, unsolved problems. And there's absolutely no doubt that sustainability and climate change is a high-value, unsolved problem. So that's the kind of the good news. The bad news, perhaps, is that we don't necessarily have the financing structures in place to support a lot of the opportunities. And I mean, for example, Nick mentioned that ISIF have a time horizon of up to 25 years. That's fantastic to hear, and it's really, really important. And it's also very important that organizations like Bord na Móna are involved with those long time horizons, because on the venture capital side, a lot of the time horizons are 10 years, 10 years maximum in many cases. You know, you need to fit inside a 10-year fund. So that's a big issue. Do we have the right financing structures to address some of these capital-intensive challenges and long-term challenges?
And do you have any recommendations in that regard, or any kind of silver bullets?
Well, I mean, for us as a firm in Draper Esprit, we became very, very conscious of those challenges, not specifically related to sustainability, but even areas of deep technology like fabless semiconductor. We invested in one company which went for 10 years with no revenue, and then went 1 million, 10 million, 40 million. So, you know, once it got there, it really took off. And we just realized that kind of 13-year time horizon just doesn't fit well into a 10-year fund. So in our case, what we did was we went public. And that means we're no longer operating 10-year funds. We invest from our balance sheet, and we can hold investments for essentially as long as we want to. But we'd be pretty unusual in the venture capital space, you know.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Brian. And then maybe, Yvonne, from a banking perspective, could you give us a bit of a flavour of how AIB is looking at this space and what they're doing and what the banking community is doing?
Yeah, so I suppose just focusing in on climate, we've set quite ambitious targets that by 2030, at least 70% of our new lending will be green or transition. Now, last year, that was 19%, mainly measuring green, but it is a big trajectory that we have to get to over those years. So I think for us as a bank, and you mentioned regulation, you know, regulation is welcome because it's actually driving the right activity at pace. And for us, we kind of have 4 areas that we look at under climate. So the first is that we kind of have our own net zero in our own operations, and we're looking at a power purchase agreement to directly get solar energy. The second one is how we support our customers to transition. So for us, we have a number of green propositions that we've launched. We've a project finance team that funds, climate infrastructure, renewable energy, and that's the fastest growing part of our balance sheet at the moment. And it's not just about providing the propositions. I suppose what we're finding from our customers is some are really struggling to even get started on the journey, to know where they need to go. So our role is looking at what information and guidance we can provide and advisory support, as well as tools to help them kind of get on that journey. And then the third area is managing risk, and that's where a lot of the regulation is focused. So for us, we have to understand when somebody's looking for finance, what is the purpose of it, and whether it's green or not, and then what's the risk associated with this, and also what's the risk associated with the borrower, so to be able to really assess and quantify the risk going forward related to those. So that's a big area. It's obviously a focus from regulation. And then the fourth area is how we steer our portfolios to net zero. So that means, we have set science-based targets for the majority of our loan book. So we've 60 billion of a loan book. So that means that we have to look at, and we've already incorporated this in our financial plans, across our different portfolios, looking to see what is the increase in green lending versus non-green lending we need to achieve across each of those. So, for example, if we take residential mortgages, what percentage of A and B rated homes do we need in our new lending over the next number of years, but also the number of retrofits that need to happen. And that means it's driving kind of new things that we need to care about and be concerned about, which is the ecosystem of how customers get things done. So our kind of reach and the expectation around what we need to do needs to be a lot greater than just given the finance. We have to work and collaborate to make sure that customers can get done what they need to get done in as seamless a way as possible.
And are there practical advantages for, let's say, some of the startup companies, early stage companies, knocking on the door in terms of the door opens faster, or the rates are a bit more competitive, or is that lens applied to it?
So there's a fund in terms of looking at finance in the climate space, and we also, I suppose, differentiate the finance. There's preferential interest rates for those lending with green purposes and transition over time. So it's a genuine. There was a lot of talk about sustainable business. That is the genuine, to lead what needs to happen in the space. Being one of two kind of pillar banks, we have the opportunity to influence and really help drive and lead the transition that needs to happen.
Very good. Thank you.
Can I add to that? So I see, let's say, amongst the companies that come to us, the startups, the scale-ups that come to us, I see that they're getting approached by the banks who are saying we're more open. And of course, I don't know the specific situation with AIB, but I do know that with the banks in the Netherlands, that then it usually still does stop. And that at the end of the day, they look at a technology risk, they look at a commercial risk, and particularly things that are not proven, that there is not already a 50 kiloton plant, and you're building the 15 kiloton plant that needs to become. No money. It is just not available from the banks, and therefore it comes to VC. That's nice for us, but still that availability of capital, particularly for the economy to move from refineries, mining companies, car building companies, which is all huge amounts of steel and capex, to move to something new, we actually need more money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
we as VC will not be able to pull that off, especially not in the time constraint that we have, which we've talked about here today.
Yeah, no, I think that's valid. Like, it's a new area. It's, the expertise has to grow in our bank and all the other banks. But I suppose we've put a dedicated project finance team in place that's looking at these kind of newer areas and upskilling. That is absolutely growing and flying. But there's a journey to go on for sure. And I think, part of the risk assessment, the risk assessment has to happen, and I suppose that probably needs to evolve as well in terms of the newer technologies and newer opportunities. But yeah, hopefully it will evolve.
I guess
think,
sorry.
Sorry, if I can just add something to that. I think we also have a special situation in Ireland, which is essentially regulatory and policy driven, which is that Irish banks are required to hold an awful lot more capital than their peers in Europe. And what that's effectively done is it has made the Irish banks cash flow lenders instead of asset lenders. And that's hugely problematic for early stage companies. So the reality is that debt is not readily available to early stage companies, even if what they want to do is to finance assets, which would be more appropriately financed with debt rather than with venture capital. And a lot of that is fundamentally about policy and regulatory policy. That's the reality.
Absolutely, but I guess we're saying that there are gaps in if you look at traditional business, there's a kind of spectrum of opportunities, but there are key gaps in the sustainable journey that haven't been plugged yet. Okay, very good. And Faye, have you any perspectives on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think gaps, obviously, and along the way. I think there's another source of funding, though, that I think is really exciting is some of the research money and money coming from the European government, from the European Innovation Council, and also here in Ireland, the Disruptive Innovative Technologies. I hope that I have that acronym right. So I think that can be really helpful to de-risk some of these projects. Alongside, before venture can come in, or maybe alongside venture, because we kind of like to wake up, we'd sort of divide it into the evolutionary technologies or revolutionary technologies. And I would say there are going to be a lot more evolutionary technologies where essentially legacy industries are retrofitting themselves to adapt to climate change. And, you know, some of that work is not going to be very sexy. It's going to be kind of boring, actually. But there needs to be finance available for that, and there needs to be know-how. And I think it's a great opportunity to bring in talent or to bring in more opportunities in our education system to educate young people so they can go into that workspace. And then for the revolutionary technologies, which I, of course, get super excited about, you know, maybe that's where higher capital with a bit higher risk appetite can come in. But even there, some of them are kind of crazy. You know, you're taking some kind of waste and then turning it into something else. You're going to need those plants that cost a lot of money. So we do need to take big risks. And from my time living in Ireland, I know we don't always love risk here. So I think it's going to take maybe a bit of re-engineering in our own mindset about how we're going to face the future, because I really don't think we have a choice. It's not a nice to have. It's a must have.
Yep. Very good. Thank you, Faye. We're all kind of profit focused, so I know Deirdre, you're from the not-for-profit sector. You know, have you got specific asks from the financing and investment community in terms of how it can help in the not-for-profit space to accelerate the transition that we're talking about, and you know, just general thoughts about?
Yeah. So I think the particular area, I think, where philanthropy and government funds can come together in terms of the green transition we're talking about is the areas where either social enterprises or social innovations or community-based groups of one type or another play a particular role. And I mean, there are lots of sectors that they play a role in, but I think where you start to see critical mass is circular economy. Biodiversity, but there are also quite a lot of soft work that isn't really investment ready, if you like, that needs to be done around things like supporting communities to build their capacity to actually build their own community plans for the green transition at local level, at regional level. So supporting communities to come together to build their skills. We heard earlier, what was it, climate literacy, I think Mary Rose said. Anyway, so like enabling communities, and particularly more marginalised communities, to come together and build their own plans and buy-in. And I think those are the areas where there's a big need that investment, traditional investment, is never going to play a role there. And government has limited capacity. It plays a role, but it has limited capacity to really get involved. And so I think where we like to play is we like to bring philanthropy to the table, because basically philanthropy is society's risk capital, okay? Philanthropy is independent. We all know that when politicians put our money down on projects that don't work, we like to lacerate them as taxpayers. So they don't really like, and we don't really give them that much permission to take risks with our money. So that's where philanthropy on social problem solving can really play a role around backing innovations. And that's really the unique quality of philanthropy, wherever that comes from. We work on 5 key issue areas. We work on educational disadvantage, health with a special focus on mental health, equality issues, helping social enterprises to grow and scale, and the green transition. And what we have found very interesting over the last couple of years is how hard it has been to raise money for the green transition. Like, everybody is saying this is the biggest crisis of our generation, but we are not finding that companies, individuals, high net worth families are putting their money down, or at least not with us, at the same rate as all those other 4 issues. So we can raise money for those other 4 issues. We've raised 73 million. Only about 5 million of that has been on green transition. So I'm throwing that observation out there as a challenge. First of all, what's happening here? Like, what I would say a very early observation is, in the last 3 to 6 months, we're seeing a little shift. A little shift. So, for example, I'm on my way west tonight to pitch a family tomorrow who are thinking about shifting their philanthropy from a more traditional focus for a family philanthropy into green transition. And we're going to have a big chat about, well, if they did that with us, what could we offer? What would that look like? And we're keen to have lots of those conversations. But I have found it interesting, and I don't really know why. Like, my speculation would be that philanthropy tends to be in the hands of older people, whether it is within a company or whether it's because they've made their money or they've inherited their money. And so the issues they're focused on until now have not been that. The older people that I have met that are passionate about this transition are grandparents, and they're motivated by their grandchildren. So they're not motivated by the unique opportunity, the investment opportunity, the big idea. They're actually motivated not by their children, by their grandchildren. I've got a 5-year-old grandchild, and I'm just wondering what he's going to say to me when he's 20. Did I do enough? When he's living in the world that he might have to live in, did I do enough? And maybe I need to think about that now and move my money. So those are the kinds of motivations that we're just beginning to see. But, you know, it's anecdotal. I'm not saying this is a data-driven conversation, but it needs to move much faster. And look, our mission is to make the size of the pie bigger. So we're not trying to take money from one issue to give it to another issue. But I would definitely call out and say, come and talk to us, because we need to build a green transition fund. And so another thing, I'm going to Galway tomorrow, and one of the things I'm going to do, which I'm really excited about, is go and see an investment that we made, a growth stage investment that we made in the circular economy. If you're from Galway, you probably know it. It's called Bounce Back Recycling. Maybe you can guess what they recycle. So they're recycling mattresses. And what I love about this, we're putting in about 450,000 over 3 years. So significant money to grow them from a Galway-based. So they recycle all the mattresses in Galway, and you might not know this. Does anybody know anything about mattress recycling?
No.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
You do. Okay. Well, you can correct me on all my figures.
Yeah, and you can make profit too with it.
So exactly.
Yes.
You can.
Yes.
So this is a social enterprise, but they do make a profit, and they plow that back into their mission. So you can recycle about 90% of a mattress. And why I'm going to Galway tomorrow is with the investment, they've been able to buy machinery they could not buy before. So it was purely manual, and now they can take a mattress apart in about 3 minutes. That used to take about 20 minutes. And that is going to enable them to scale up nationally over the next 2.5 years. So by the end of 2024, they will be recycling enough mattresses to fill the volume of Croke Park every year, which You've all been in Croke Park. You might not have been in Croke Park. So that's our national stadium for Gaelic games, and it's huge. So that is the amount of mattresses that we are not recycling in Ireland right now. They're going into landfill. But they also make a profit. They plough that into the mission. And what's their mission? Their mission is to employ unemployed traveller men and women. And so they will also triple their employment. And then what does the surplus go to? The surplus goes to pay university fees for travellers who want to go to university. So it's a triple bottom line in a totally different way than how we normally think about it. Educational impact, environmental impact, employment impact, breaking the cycle of poverty. So to me, that is just the perfect investment from our point of view. But they were going nowhere. They were going nowhere. We were able to work with them to raise this money because it is such a fantastic high-impact project. It potentially could be for-profit. So one of the investors we found for them said, I will give you the full 450,000 if you make it a for-profit business. Change your registration. And they went away and thought about it, and they said no, and they turned down 450,000 and said, no, we believe in what we do. We believe in our social mission. And then they raised the money anyway. So to me, that's an amazing story of impact, of ethics. You can argue whether it was the right decision, but they got the money anyway.
It's actually a different definition of profit. Because the profit is there,
Oh, the
but
profit is there.
it gets plowed back in
Yeah.
the community.
Yeah.
So, and that is, I think, where the distinction between, let's say, which we're making here is like, oh, you are not for profit, and we are for profit. That distinction is blurring, and I see it particularly with our circular economy entrepreneurs. So, if you are a circular economy entrepreneur, you have an immense awareness. Okay, where does my stuff come from? It flows through my factory or whatever I have, and then it goes there. And where does it then end up? And how do I link that up? Once you have that awareness, you also have an awareness of, okay, who are actually the people that are involved in this activity? Where do they live? And you see them particularly, we have others as well, but particularly circular economy entrepreneurs, very engaged with their local workforce, very engaged. And that's what I hear here as well. And that's also, I think also from our side, this is blurring. So they will spend more time, more money, more effort on their workforce. And of course, if you're being very strict accountant, you could count that. You could say, well, you could spend that on more business development, or you could maybe you could reduce the salaries a bit here. No, that's not what this is about. This is bigger.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. And I think one of the things that we love about working with them is obviously they came up with the mattress recycling. They had the business going. We don't know anything about mattress recycling. But we were able to obviously support them around building the investment, but also we're helping them to build a business advisory council around the CEO because they are a community development project. So let's just make sure those strong business principles are there to help them build the surplus so they can plough it back into their mission. But also supporting them with what's their growth plan, what's their financing plan. We have Martin Ward, the amazing CEO and traveller leader of the project, pitching, storytelling, doing packages on RTE. So just adding that skill set that I think it's hard for people who come from a community development or a community-based background to access those skills as well as access that money. So I think the piece that we can do, a bit like Enterprise Ireland, a bit like a VC fund, is to help close that gap. And it's not just a financing gap, it's an access to networks and a skills gap too, so that we lift up amazing scalable projects like that. So it isn't just for Galway, it's actually for the whole of Ireland.
Very good. Thank you, Deirdre. That's a great example. I suppose one last question, open up to the panel. Is there one particular change you would like to see, whether it be in the regulatory environment, governmental policy, European-wide policy, that might kind of move the needle again or move it further in this space that you would prioritise if there was one specific ask? Any volunteers for that one?
I have two.
Okay, go for it.
So I think the first change I'd like to see building off, I think we've been all in violent agreement that what we're really talking about here is purpose-driven businesses. And at the moment, the way our legal forms work, you have to choose. You're either not-for-profit, registered, and that's it forever and ever, amen, or else you're for-profit. And in other countries, we have legal forms that allow a blended form and that allow asset locks on the social or environmental mission while still enabling equity and other types of investment. And I think we're losing access to finance for purpose-driven businesses because our Irish company law is too rigid on that front. And that's being looked at under the social enterprise policy, but government moves very slowly. So we would like to really see that accelerated. And I think that would really help Wake Up Capital. That would also help us. That would help loads of us in the room to just get that money moving from the private sector into tackling social and environmental issues. And at the moment, there's all these little silos and you've got to fit into this, that, or the other box. So it's quite hard to make that money move.
We have time for one more. I don't know if you're going to steal it, Deirdre, or does anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I think it would be fabulous to see all sort of top-level management in government, business, et cetera, where they are compensated also based on their own impacts on environment, so that their compensation is linked to environmental and social impact, and that basically impact goes on the balance sheet of their organization, but also on their own personal balance sheet. Because until people have a carrot in front of them, I don't think our sticks are big enough. I think that's the only way we're going to see significant change.
Very good. Thank you, Faye. We had a hand up here for the last word. We're out of time. Peter, had you the last word?
So we had this in Axonobel, by the way. And it's unfortunately, it was the bucket where we got most of our bonus. So the rest didn't work so well. In terms of changing something, I think it has been mentioned here today as well. I think regulation sometimes gets in the way. Right? We have set up regulation, particularly to make sure that there's no collusion. Right? That companies don't get together and then they agree prices. Now, what's the essence of the circular economy is actually companies getting together, maybe not to agree prices, but to agree a system. So how are we going to do that? Okay, you do this, then if you supply this to me at that cost, and you got this, then at the end, here we can all make money. But if you look at that from a regulatory perspective, you get really scared because people are colluding. They are not. They're actually building the circular economy. And I think we need to work with our regulators, our politicians, to somehow create free spaces where this can happen. And then at some point, of course, we're going to have to make sure that people are not setting up their own profits.
Well, I'm going to get fined if we go any further, so I better call it there. So thanks very much to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody.